Welcome back, students. Today we'll be talking about the second video of CSS, elaborating the usage of selectors and properties. Now, what is a selector? That is what we have to know first. And properties are just how we style or design the respective elements. Okay. So we'll talk about properties as we go through uh, about the introduction of about the whole class of CSS. That is all the videos of CSS. You will be knowing about properties from start to end. But primarily, as we know that CSS process of designing or styling is selecting an element and then editing the contents. So selecting can be done in one of the following procedures. That is what we have to discuss first, and then we'll have a live demonstration of how we'll be doing it. Okay. So let's start. Now the first question is, what is a selector? Now, in general terminology, a selector can be talked about the way of grabbing and manipulating HTML. Like for example, an HTML contains different elements, where an element is nothing but the start tag, the end tag, and the text in between them, along with the properties or attributes. So the complete thing is referred to as your element. So title is an element, paragraph is an element, H1 is an element, because it will contain the whole thing in a single go. So we generally tend to grab that particular element and then do the editing, that is manipulation of that particular HTML element. Now selecting that particular thing can be done in more than one ways. There are many ways of doing it, but the general way of following are what we have to discuss now. Okay. So you may know that how to select a particular element is totally based on how the coder is coding it, or is trying to access that particular element. There may be hundreds of ways, many ways of accessing that element, but you may decide which way to access, which will actually depend on the type of programming you are doing, right? The type of accessibility you are getting to access it. Okay, there are different ways of doing it. So that is what we have to discuss now. Okay. Now, different selectors have different applications, obviously, and every selector, whichever we decide to select, whichever selector we want to use, depends on the application type which we are using at hand. Okay. Now, the first selector, which generally is the general or the global way of accessing, is the element selector. Now, element is just the tag name. For example, you can easily see here that H1, P, H1, these are all elements, right? And what we have done here in the styling part is we have used the tag name, and that particular tag name is used to code or specify the attribute or properties, whatever we have. Now, the entire element can be selected without any special characters. That means whenever we talk about this, the whole element, all the elements of that particular document will be selected in this section. Okay. This applies to all the elements, obviously, for the tags on the page. So if a page contains 10 paragraphs, then this particular property, that is color, specify the color to red, will be applied to all the paragraphs of the whole page. So maybe there are 10 elements, 10 paragraph elements, then all the paragraph elements will have the same attribute. Okay, the same thing. So element selector is very useful when we generally want to perform a global operation, a global applicability of a tag, okay, or an element. So for all paragraphs, I need to send that there must be a background image, there must be a foreground color, there must be something which I would like to do. So whatever you would like to do, you do it, and that will be the first thing which will be applied. Now, it ranks on the bottom of the specificity scale. Now, what is specificity scale? For example, if I specify an element selector and then overwrite it with a class selector or an ID selector, then the class or ID selector will be primarily used rather than the bottom specific, that is the element selector. For example, you give the color as red, and in another way, I specify the color as green using a class selector. Then the class selector will be applied, and the element selector will be you can say you will not be able to see that changes. Okay, so it will be overridden. It will be over, the effects will be overridden by a class or ID selector. Okay, we'll be talking about class and ID selector later on. We'll be focusing on this feature when we do a practical demonstration on the same. Okay. Now, what is a class selector? Now, class selector means not all the elements will be selected. There will be a class which will be creating, and what will we do is we specify the element with a certain class name. For example, we give a class 2 as A class. Okay, the class attribute we have specified for H2 and P as A class, and it can be used for any or all elements of that class, obviously. So for H2 also and for paragraph also, in both the cases we are using the same class name. Now, as because the color is blue, now both the heading as well as the paragraph have the color blue. So this is the global thing which we are having here. The most important part is when we define a class name, then we have to use the dot symbol. The dot symbol must be used. For example, we have defined the name as A class, but initially we have to give a dot symbol. So the only difference here is it can be from element selector is, an element selector can be applied for all the tags of that particular document, right? But for class selector, you can give a name of your own, but it must start with a dot symbol, and that particular class can be assigned to more than one elements of your document. So it is not fixed that it is not just for paragraph that I am creating this class. This class can be specified for more than one element types. Okay, it can be heading, it can be paragraph, it can be title, it can be your you can say list, it can be anything. So the only thing to be known here is before the name you have to give a symbol, that is your dot symbol. That is important. Next comes the ID selector. Now generally ID selectors have a particular name, and this also is specified with a particular element or element set. Generally, ID is assumed to be specified with a single element, because that is why we give that particular ID. An ID is generally a name which is given to an element which to be accessed through JavaScript also. So when we give an ID name, then obviously we are doing a one-to-one thing, right? A single element has to be coded, a single element has to be designed, but you can use it more than once. It's an option that you can use it more than once. But what we do is we generally don't use the ID for more than one element. For that you can use class if you want. Okay. Okay. Now it can be used on any or all elements with that ID. Now we know that ID cannot be common for more than one element. So this is one of the things which is somehow I've given you the information, but it is not a thing which is to be applied with. Okay, try to use IDs only for those elements, only single elements, and for example, let's say title. For a title for the whole document, there will be a single title only. So we can give the ID as title, right? Similarly, if I want to give a conclusion or a introduction, The introduction and conclusion will be only one. So therefore, the structure, the heading, the footer, introduction, conclusion, title, these can be IDs. Okay, because we know that the document will have only a single number of element of that particular type. In the example section, I'll talk about it. But unlike classes, it can be only be used on one element at a time and is selected with the hash symbol. Now, here the name is started with a hash symbol. So in class, the name starts with a dot symbol, and here it starts with a hash symbol. That is what we should know. However, it is possible to use more than once. So from start only, I am telling you that it can be used in more than one elements, but you should not do that. You should always use only on a single element type, and that particular element would be unique in that particular document. If there are more of that kind, then instead of creating an ID, you should create a class for it. Why? Because you will be using it multiple times. So multiple usage, go for class. For single usage, go for ID. And for all elements, go for element. So these are the type of selectors which you can use and you should use in your programming sequence for styling and designing. Now there would be a practical demonstration on how to use selectors, and that is what is left for today's class. Okay, so let's go. So what I've done, I have already a HTML file with me, and in this HTML file, I have just given some important segments like I have exam HTML content. This is my H1 tag. In the H2 tag, I have used what is HTML element sound tags, and there are two paragraphs and a title, and this is it. Now, there is nothing more special in this particular class. But here we'll be using all the three types of selectors one by one. First, I would like to say that whenever I'm talking about an H1 heading 1, H2, there are two H2s, okay, heading 2. So I would like to set all the headings of second type to red color, okay. So I have already linked this CSS file. You can look at here. The href is //css style.css. Everything is connected. Just I need to add the codes here and I have to test it there. So H2. Simple. This is now an element selector. Now what I can do is I can specify different types of attributes or properties. Now we have list of properties, a very big list of properties. But there are some properties which will be learning during our general format. We'll be learning them, but on the way. But in general terms, the commonest is your color. So let's say I like to set the color as red. I've saved it. Let me run it. Now, in this particular document, there were two H2s, and all the H2s are now in on which color? These are in red color. So this is clear that a global set of tags can be achieved like this. Similarly, if I set a paragraph tag like, and I say background color yellow, save it, run it. So here it is saying that, okay, see, the first paragraph has been transformed, but the second paragraph has not been transformed. Why is it so? Let us see. In the HTML file, if I analyze, then There is a closing opening tag of paragraph here. The closing tag of paragraph is there, but there is no opening tag of paragraph here. This is an error here. There is a closing, but there was no opening. That was the problem. So if I save it and then run it, all the paragraphs will have that background as yellow. So if I say no, instead of doing this, do something simpler. So let us be on the normal section only. Color as blue. Okay, now this is done. Now, this is where we are defining an element tag and then we are applying the general rules. So if we need to apply the general rules, then we can do it by default, like the background, the foreground of the body, the general text color, the size, the image resolution, everything can be set here in element tags. Now let me create a class tag. Now we already know that if we want to define a class tag, we should give a starting symbol as dot and then give a name to it. Okay, so I'll give the name as para. Now this is a special paragraph. Why? Because in this particular paragraph, I would like to first of all it is to be applied on a paragraph. Number two, when the paragraph it is applied on a paragraph, it should be your okay. Let's just see text align right and color is is green. Okay, let us do these changes in this HTML file. In the second file, I would like to say paragraph and a space. Then I'll give class. I will assign the created class here. So the class created was para. I just assign para to it and then save it and then run it. Let's see what happens. So you can see that paragraph has become right aligned. Number two, the color has become green, and this is what I wanted in this paragraph. But by default, all the paragraphs have the color by default color as blue. But this particular color has become green and the text alignment has become right. Text alignment means alignment. Now, instead of alignment, I can assume that for all other paragraphs, the text align can be just justified. Justify, and that would be better because it will utilize the complete page. Okay, the complete page will be utilized in that segment. This is right aligned. Now, I can assign it. This para can be assigned to any attribute in any tag. For example, if I assign it to this h2, h1 class equals to para. Save it and then run it. So this is also possible. So it can be assigned to more than one attributes, sorry, more than one tags, elements, and it will have the same effect for all of them. Now, if I want to restrict them from using this class, I can simply delete this call and it will be normal as ever. So it is right aligned. HTML is right aligned. This paragraph is right aligned. Now, when I remove this, both of them, right from H1, I've removed the class as para. From paragraph, I've removed class para. Now I save it and then run it. Automatically, everything's come back to normal. Okay. And now you can see that this HTML, this last paragraph has also become justified, right? Okay. Now, if I want this to be, okay, let us do one thing. Now, the last thing remains is your ID. Okay. Generally, we should create an ID with the use of hash symbol. This will define an ID for us. Now, an ID can be assumed to be a single element specificable, yes, single element um, design, okay, or single element style. So let us say it can be your title, your or heading, and I would say that this can be the text align can be center for my case. Number two, the color can be like very strong or navy. The font size can be 12 points. Now, then we can say this is enough. Now what I'll do, I'll just go back to my HTML code and I'll set this as the ID equals to heading. Now, once I save this code and then I run here, you can see that the HTML content is coming on top, but the size is somehow diminished, right? So what I can do is I can thirty-five. 35 is okay. HTML content is center aligned. So whenever if I assign this ID heading to my H2 and all the H2s, this will also have the same effect, right? So when I apply them, for example, in this heading, there is one thing which I have already discussed. This is one thing which I have to discuss. We already discussed is that we have three different types of grabbing elements. One is using the tag name, number two using a class name, and number three using an ID. Now, as because we are specifying all the things through our script file, we can do one thing more. We can directly specify the style as it is on the spot, that is with the tag. And this can be done here any way possible. Conclusion. Okay. Now here, instead of specifying, now I know that H2 has already a default specification. And if I run this, that will be how it will be sweet. The color would be red. But we can directly specify the code here, like style equals to, now specify whatever you want to specify in your double quotes. Okay. All the attributes, whatever you have specified here, one by one, you can specify in the code itself. So if I say, okay, First thing, text alignment would be right. Your decision. Whatever you say, it will be done. Second, the color which I want to do, just specify, is olive. God knows if it exists or not, but still, I save it and then run the code. So it has become olive. Somehow it has picked the color, and it has the alignment is right aligned. Now, even if I use a class, let's say I am specifying a class as para, or even though if I specify an ID, that is heading. Now, according to you, what will stay in effect? If I run the code now, so whenever we talk about your which will remain in effect and which will not, the particular style which you have specified internally, that is here, will remain always. Some attributes which you specify in the class or in ID will come effect if you want to do that. The alignment and color as what you have done. Now, if I specify the para background as yellow, then it will come as yellow. So if I go to this background, this also has two, that also had two. So I'll just say background color as yellow. So whatever is specified in the simple thing will be first done. Then all the residue properties will be assigned from the respective uh, properties. Now, if you have class and ID, both of them specified, be rest assured that ID will never be specified. It is always the class which will be picked up. So the order of its execution, the importance is always given to the direct specified properties, then comes to the class, and then selector, and then comes the element selector. This is how the order in which a code or an element design is maintained or it is being performed. So in this particular class, we have discussed about how to select an element, how to select an element or grab a element from a document, a set of elements from a document using element selector, then class selector and ID selector. And if you don't want to use any of this cascading style sheet properties, the only thing which you can do is you can directly use the base programming and through that you can directly implement your design. Okay, so I hope that you have understood today's class. So we'll be meeting in the next video. In that particular video, we'll be talking about something more about CSS program.